Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to get started now. Welcome to our webinar today, which is about the policy and procedures for addressing harassment and workplace violence in the church. My name is Carragh Erhardt. I'm the program coordinator for Sexuality and Inclusion at the PCC's national office. Ian Ross-McDonald, who is the General Secretary for the Life and Mission Agency, is also here with us today and will be sharing in the presentation. Um, and we'll be talking about some revisions that were made to the policy and that were adopted at 2026 General Assembly earlier this month. We're gathering online today from many different places, and in doing so, we've recognized that the places where we live, work, and worship are the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. And we begin gatherings like this by acknowledging the material, spiritual, and cultural importance of these lands to the first peoples who have stewarded it for millennia, and the ongoing care that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people have shown and continue to show the land. Today, I'm at the church's national office, which is on the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe nations. These lands are part of a few different treaties, including Treaty 13, otherwise known as the 1805 Toronto Purchase Agreement, which is held by the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Williams Treaties, which are signed in 1923 by representatives of the Crown and Ontario, along with the Chippewa Tri-Council, which includes the Chippewas of Beausoleil, the Chippewas of Georgina Island, and the Chippewas of Rama, as well as the Mississauga nations from Alderville, Curve Lake, Hiawatha, and Scugog Island. This land is also part of an older agreement known as the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, which is an agreement between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee nations to share the land and its resources, acknowledge the ongoing significance of these treaties for all people living on the land today. And as a church, we acknowledge the sacred connection between Indigenous peoples who lived and continue to live on the land and whose practices, spiritualities, laws, and traditions continue to be in relationship with it. We commit ourselves to the work of being in good relationship with the land and with one another. And we confess that the Presbyterian Church in Canada has not always lived up to that commitment, and there's much work ahead for us. As we prepare for our time today to talk about the church's harassment policy, which supports us in thinking about what it means to foster safer, healthier relationships and spaces, I'm going to invite you all to take a moment for some reflection before we get started. I'm going to ask you to call to mind the nations whose traditional territory you're on. Think about the treaty and the lands where you lived and the treaties, if any, that cover that land. Nurturing and maintaining good relationships requires persistent, care-filled attention and taking accountability for repair when relationships are violated. What's your relationship with the land and the Indigenous people who call it home? How might you contribute to repair and well-being in those relationships? You don't need to share any of that in the chat, but I encourage you as you take a moment to write down just a few words that come to mind to describe those relationships so that you can come back to them later. Today, as we look at the church's policy and procedures for addressing harassment and workplace violence, we'll be talking a bit about just a brief overview of what the policy is, and we'll cover an overview of both the revision process and the proposed changes that have been made. The changes that were proposed and were adopted at the General Assembly. We'll also show you a little bit around the Presbyterian Church in Canada's website, where to find those safety policies and some resources to support you in that work. We're going to have lots of time for questions towards the end of the presentation, so I'm going to invite you to hold on to your questions until then. Although you're welcome to send in questions at any point through the chat, we'll just answer them later on. Please avoid sharing confidential information. We know that some of you might be here because there are situations that are weighing on you and that you're trying to figure out how to navigate. We want to help you with this as best as we can, but please avoid sharing confidential information. We are recording this so that we can share it for people's benefit afterwards who weren't able to be here. I also ask people to ensure that their question is a question. It gives me a better sense of what we need to respond to and how to best help you out with what you're looking to find more information on. We'll go over these again at the end of the presentation, but just wanted to invite us to think about these things as we're going through. The Life and Mission Agency is responsible for regular review of the denomination's safety policies. So that includes leading with care and the policy for dealing with sexual abuse and sexual harassment in the church as well. The revision process typically starts with staff in the Life and Mission Agency reading the policy and procedures to note areas where greater clarity is needed, so where we might have questions, or where there are aspects of the procedures that need to be updated based on things that we've been hearing from across the church. Likewise, the clerks of assembly offer their advice, and clerks of presbyteries and synods are invited to share their comments as well. Throughout that process, the Life and Mission Agency is also in contact frequently with the denomination's legal counsel, who give their input as well based on best practices in their industry and changes to legislation. When General Assembly adopted the updated policy, they also adopted a recommendation that gives the Life and Mission Agency permission to make changes to this policy and a number of others as necessary without seeking approval of General Assembly. That's only for, changes that are responding to legislation. It helps us respond to things more nimbly and make sure that our policy is as up to date as possible without needing to wait potentially up to a year for changes to be made. That also acknowledges, though, that changes to the policy statement or significant changes to the procedures still require the General Assembly's approval. So if there's anything that is more significant, we'll always be bringing that to General Assembly.
Thank you, Carragh. And thank you, everyone who's taken some time today to join us to think a little bit and learn a little bit about this important part of the church's pastoral ministry. This is a policy that the congregations and presbyteries and synods, all General Assembly committees, colleges, and other ministries of the church are to review annually. And we'll explain a little later how some of that annual review can be done in your circumstances. But as we look at the beginning of the policy and procedures for the policy statement for this policy, the statement is unchanged from the previous edition. So the policy of the Presbyterian Church in Canada is that harassment of any kind shall not be tolerated and shall be addressed. Everyone has the right to expect to be treated with respect and to work and worship and volunteer in a safe environment that's free of violence and harassment. And every person in the church is expected to behave in ways that offer the same kind of respect and safety to everyone. So we have expectations placed on ourselves and expectations of others that are fair and appropriate and pastorally observed in these policies. The policy applies to everyone who's employed in the PCC or who participates in the life of the church as a worshiper or a volunteer or a visitor in our churches. The harassment policy also covers bullying and discrimination on all the protected grounds. The protected grounds in Ontario are the following: citizenship, race, place of origin, ethnic origin, color, ancestry, disability, age, creed, sex, including pregnancy, family status, marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and receipt of public assistance in housing, and also any record of offense that you may have on your records. It's important that all the churches and ministries and courts within our church pay special attention to the protected grounds in each of the provinces that they work in. Many of the protected grounds are the same in each of the provinces, but they do vary a little bit in each place. So that means those protected grounds means that nobody can be discriminated against on any of those items or any of those qualities or qualifications that I just listed a few moments ago. Also, this policy helps support the church as a workplace. As an employer, the PCC has a legal obligation to have a policy such as this in place and to keep it up to date and to ensure that we carry out the best practices that are advised and also that reflect the evolving legislation across Canada. For example, the province of Ontario has passed legislation requiring employees to have a policy addressing workplace violence and domestic violence. And that explains why this policy has had a change in title and is also been updated in that regard. As we go, um, finally, the policy promises regular training. And that regular training can be done on the kinds of workshops like this one that are held regularly throughout the year or online. And Carragh will walk us through those online training resources later. And again, churches, sessions, presbyteries, synods, camps, colleges are encouraged to contact us, and we're willing to do and happy to do and eager to do training in any of the safe church policies. That would be leading with care, this policy on harassment, and the sexual abuse and harassment policy. As we now begin to look at some of the revisions, we made revisions according to the outline that Carragh explained earlier for reasons that are listed on the screen. Sometimes we found places where material was not as clear as it might have been, or people misunderstood what we were getting at. There were also some errors in grammar and spelling. We also want to ensure that the information flows well and is in a style and in wording that people understand and find accessible. Additionally, there have been some legal reasons for us to change the policy. There have been some changes in the legislation in various provinces, notably Quebec and Ontario. And we also, two of those areas, workplace violence and church procedures, continuing or not during police investigations, are those two prime areas that we'll focus on today that have been changed with this latest edition. And then another revision that we made was to call for added support, which can be found on page 10 of the document that's currently online. As we move now to talk about workplace violence is the use of physical force that causes or could possibly cause physical injury or the threat of such physical force. From time to time, domestic or interpersonal relationships spill out of the home or out of the relationship and can threaten people in the workplace. The church, as an employer, has to take every precaution reasonable to protect individuals who are at threat of experiencing violence resulting from domestic violence. Anyone who has knowledge of actual or potential domestic violence against themselves or a worker reports that threat to the employer. This means that if you are aware that there is a situation that you're in that is dangerous, it's important that you tell your employer about that danger so the employer can take every step reasonable to protect you and your and other people who work and volunteer in that context. We hope that this isn't something that people have to address, but it's important for all employers to be aware that they do have this responsibility and be open about it with staff in their conversations and be prepared to take precautions whenever there is a spillover of violence in relationships and the home into the workplace. Another revision is about police investigations. Historically, in both the sexual abuse and harassment policy and the harassment policy, the church processes of investigating a complaint were halted if there was a criminal complaint until after the police investigations were concluded. So if somebody made a complaint of harassment, but there was a legal aspect to it, and the police were investigating, the church's processes stopped. And then after the police investigation was done, the church procedures would begin again. Uh, there is a revision, and it's a revision that's required of us under law. And the revision is this: the church processes halt when there's a criminal investigation underway until after those police investigations are concluded, unless the complaint is made by an employee or the complaint is made against an employee. So you can imagine a situation in which two volunteers, perhaps in the church, are engaged in a dynamic in their relationship that is um, bullying or harassment or violent, even. And if there is a police complaint, you would cease the investigation until after the police investigation was completed, and then you would pick up the church process. If, however, those were not volunteers, but was somebody either who was an employee who made the complaint, or the person was an employee who was complained against. In that case, both the police investigation and the church procedures proceed at the same time. And people may have questions about that we can review at the end of the presentation. There's another revision that's been added that is somewhat significant, and that is that we're asking the church to be in touch with us whenever there is the completion of a complaint process where the complaint has been substantiated. Especially in the area of workplace violence, we want to be in touch with you because we'd like to know how that process went for you, what would be helpful for you as you went through the procedures, what would be useful for us to know in preparation for the next revision. So reporting when a complaint has been substantiated to Carragh, to David Phillips, to me, to Tim Purvis, and to any of the other people that are listed on the Safe Church webpage, which Carragh will show us at the end, would be very helpful. And we take note of them. We don't need to know the people's names, but we would like to know a little bit about the nature of the complaint and what would have been helpful, what worked, what did not work, and what would be useful to others in the future, so that we can amend the policy and make it as useful as possible for the church.
Great. So, having gone through those revisions, and of course, we'll be happy to take some questions, we wanted to go over, in some ways, another change, or rather a clarification of how congregations, colleges, camps, other ministries of the church are meant to interact with this policy and make people aware of this policy. Um, so General Assembly adopted a motion as well that directs all courts, congregations, non-congregational ministries, camps, and colleges to have a prominent place on their websites that explains the church's safety policies. So leading with care, this policy around harassment and workplace violence, as well as the policy for dealing with sexual abuse and sexual harassment. So explaining that those policies exist. And then also indicating the process for raising a concern and filing an informed complaint. So giving people a chance to know what that process is going to look like and make their decisions accordingly. Um, this is good, like website hygiene and practice for the church in general, but it's important to highlight that certain provinces have more specific requirements. So, for example, if your congregation is in Quebec, you'll want to take a look at your local legislation to see what they require of you. They're more specific about laying out exact contact people who a complaint can be made with. Um, I'll show you in a second the page that we've created on the National Church's website to help with some of this. And one of the ways that you can implement this within your own congregation is simply to provide a link to these pages, as well as providing clear information within your ministry context, whether that's a congregation, a presbytery, or something else. Providing, I would say, two or more people who can be contacted if someone has a concern that they need to raise. We think it's good practice to ensure that people always have choices, so that if for some reason there's a barrier to reporting to one person listed. You could always report to the other person. That could even potentially mean that the complaint is about one of the people listed. So you want to make sure that people have options for how to bring things forward. Um, I'm going to shift which screen I'm sharing in just a second so that we can take a look now at these pages on our website.
As Carragh does that, for any congregations that are in the province of Quebec, we believe that the kind of web pages that Carragh is going to show us would fulfill the requirements in the province of Quebec. Um,
Okay. You should all be seeing right now just the homepage of the PCC's website. One of the ways that we wanted to make this as transparent as possible is to add links to what we call the Safe Church Commitment page and the Safety Policies page from anywhere else on the website. So any page that you're on, whether you're on a desktop version like this or on mobile, there's usually a bit of a stack of lines that you go to get the menu open. You should be able to find these from anywhere on the website. So when I click on Safe Church Commitment, this is largely what we would describe as our public facing page. I mean, all of these pages are accessible to the public, but if someone has asked, how do I make a complaint? This is going to be the page that you'll want to send them to for additional information beyond what you offer. Um, this lays out the church's commitment to providing and fostering safer church environments where harassment doesn't happen and where vulnerable people, especially children and vulnerable adults, are protected. Um, there's a link from here to get to the policies themselves, but the other aspect of this page is really to make sure that people have some clear information about how to make a complaint. So, knowing that if a complaint is about a minister in the Presbyterian Church in Canada, they should be contacting the clerk or moderator of the presbytery that that minister belongs to. If you click on this button here, it'll bring you to the list of presbytery and synod clerks. Likewise, for PWS&D, International Partners and Projects, PWS&D has created their own page that has information about reporting misconduct and complaints. You'll notice that these two squares don't link anywhere. That's because they're more specific and more localized than we could possibly provide information for. And these are the kinds of things that you'll want to have on your website. So if this is about someone other than a minister in a PCC congregation, people need to have quick access to information for the clerk or moderator of that congregation session. That congregation may choose to also have a couple other people who might be elders, but are designated as people who know what to do when a complaint comes in. Likewise, this applies to camps, colleges, and other non-congregational ministries. People need to know how to reach the secretary or convener of the board, or potentially the director of a camp, for example, to bring concerns forward. We've also got a section here about frequently asked questions. They're divided up to hopefully make it easier to navigate. But we hope that those cover a lot of the key questions that people might have. So questions like, can a third party make a complaint on behalf of someone else? How do we prevent harassment? Would be listed here under the general questions. And then there are more specifics about making a complaint, receiving a complaint, and questions from people who may have had a complaint made about them. If people have any additional questions, we've laid out contact information based on the policy that something is related to. So for leading with care, questions can be directed towards David Phillips, who I think is also on this call today, or Ian. Ian and I tend to handle initial questions, at least anyways, about addressing harassment and workplace violence. And there's a longer list of us who are available to talk about complaints related to the policy for dealing with sexual abuse and sexual harassment. So again, the purpose of this page really is to make sure that people have somewhere to fall back on if they're looking for general information and want to get started, or want to figure out if making a complaint makes sense for them in their situation. Um, Now I'm going to show us the safety policies page, which is a little bit Okay, great. Which is a little bit more specific for leaders within the church. Um, so there's a section that will have resources for ministries. This is continuing to evolve. Right now, there's just the Safe Church poster that congregations can use to have information clearly posted within their buildings to make it clear who to reach out to if there's a concern. There's additional resources coming very soon in this section as well. And I'm just going to show us one section here, since these all kind of mirror one another. The section here for the policy and procedures for addressing harassment and workplace violence in the church has a place where you can view or download the policy itself. And then a short video, this will be updated soon to reflect the changes in the policy. But a short video that people could use for just training and education. You could do this individually or with a group. And then there's short quizzes for each of the policies where people can review their knowledge. So again, this isn't meant to be an overly burdensome test. That could be something that a group goes through together and talks about their answers as they go as a means of doing some training together. Um, Anyone who completes that will receive an email verifying that they completed the quiz. So presbyteries who are trying to enforce some level of training and compliance might ask that people submit their emailed receipt just to show that they've done it. It doesn't give you a grade or a mark necessarily, but just to show that people have done their due diligence. Each policy, again, will also have contact information and some additional resources that can help with handling complaints under any of these policies. Going to go quickly back to our slides.
While you do that, Carragh, I'll just let everyone know when anyone visits the second Safe Church page that Carragh walked us through, they'll see that the policy that we're currently discussing is not yet formatted. When it is formatted, it will look like the other policies. The title page will be updated. It will all be laid out like the other policies, and there will be a new chart that explains or demonstrates, shows the steps that are taken in the order that they're taken in. We hope to have that up by September 1st at the latest.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've reached the time where we're going to invite you to share your questions. Feel free to submit questions through the chat. There is no Q&A function on this particular meeting, so just the chat function is great. I think you should be able to direct questions directly to Ian or myself if you don't want them to be visible to everyone. Um, and We'll see if any come in that way first, and if not, then we can also invite you to unmute yourselves and share your questions, but perhaps just do a raise hand first so that we can see and moderate questions.
As people think about questions, one of the things that I'd note is that on the Safe Church policy pages that Carragh showed you, you'll see that there are multiple people that you can contact about the harassment policies. And we do that for a number of reasons. The first reason is we would never want anyone to not be able to get an answer. So if any of us are away on vacation or out of the office for the day, you can see that there are multiple people to contact. The other reason, and one to be aware of in your own church, is that it's important to have more than one person listed who is the contact person, because we want people to have the opportunity to speak to someone they feel comfortable with. And there could be any number of reasons why people would want to speak to Carragh instead of me, or speak to David instead of me. It gives people lots of options. Okay, we have some questions. Bukoa.
Okay, thank you so much for recognizing me and thank you for the presentation. I intended asking a question, but your last statement seemed to have try to address it. The question I had in mind is that, is there any particular reason why there is no clear-cut policy to allow this complaint to come from the grassroots? For instance, if there's a kind of abuse at the congressional level, then that the congressional session will be the first channel of complaint before it goes to Presbytery
Yes,
and up there, rather than allowing, maybe leaving it open in such a way that if such a thing exists, a member will decide to go to police first without contacting the church. I don't know, is there any
yeah,
policy in that direction to avoid a situation where there are too many conflicts or making it multifaceted?
sure. Um, First of all, just to establish another principle, when a complaint is made against a minister, it is the presbytery that deals with the complaint. And when a complaint is made against a congregation member or employee, it would normally be the session that takes care of the complaint, unless it, again, is the minister who's making the complaint, in which case, again, the presbytery would attend to the complaint. Um, there is nothing to prevent anyone from ever going to the police. People are encouraged to contact the police, and being safe is one of the primary concerns that we have to have in this work. So people are free and encouraged to contact the police if there's something criminal. Sometimes you're obliged to contact the police if there is a criminal aspect to what is happening. There's no requirement to use the church policy if you've gone to the police. But there is the opportunity to use both the criminal system as well as the church system.
I think perhaps something to add to what Ian was saying too. Um, we always encourage people to address things that might lead to a harassment complaint as early as possible so that they don't escalate. And so what that means is not necessarily that every little disagreement results in a harassment complaint. Again, we were just covering the changes to the policy today, not the overall features of it. But knowing that we typically define harassment as a course and pattern of behavior, so something that's repeated over time, unless it's an incident that is so extreme that it would be considered creating a poisoned environment. Um, so if there are opportunities for whether it's elders or other leaders in the congregation to intervene when it seems that things are getting perhaps outside of the bounds of what we would understand as being respectful within the congregational context, it's always best for there to be those early interventions. Um, there's also a section of the policy that speaks to, the principles laid out in Matthew of approaching someone directly if they've harmed you, and that sometimes that's possible. Um, Sometimes that's only possible with the support of an additional person going with you. But making sure that when we're talking in our congregations about conflict and harassment, that we make sure people know that they have support in dealing with situations before it gets to the point where they feel they need to launch a formal complaint. Is that helpful in answering your question? Have we gotten to the core of it?
A follow-up. It has answered my question largely. However, I would still want to know, in case of sexual harassment against a minister, maybe by a member of the congregation, a member of the congregation have a complaint of sexual harassment, um, and it is, and such a harassment or such a conflict can be resolved. Is it possible for one to maybe advise that, as much as I know that Presbytery handles it, maybe if that complaint is given to, will I say, to the minister, a copy, so that if there can be a negotiation out of court, is something of that nature possible? I
Um,
mean, a complaint given against a minister maybe a copy is given to him, look at an advance copy to a presbytery, giving an opening or a window whereby that conflict could still be resolved, maybe without even being discussed at the presbytery. What would you advise in such a kind of scenario?
Yeah, again, except when it comes to sexual abuse and harassment, in which case there is no interaction or meeting between the person making the accusation and the person accused. As Carragh was saying, we hope that events can be addressed early on between members directly without a complaint being made. If after a course and pattern of behavior that interventions haven't addressed lead to a complaint, then if it's the minister who's making the complaint or complained against, it would be the presbytery who deals with it. But it would be hoped that in most cases, situations would be addressed early on without the policy being invoked and without the interventions of the presbytery, and that individuals going to speak with one another, as long as it's not a sexual abuse and harassment complaint, trying to resolve their differences, we hope would solve things, or taking someone else with you to try and come to some fair, reasonable solution. Otherwise, yes, the presbytery would deal with it.
Thank you. I'm satisfied now. I'm satisfied.
Thank you. It's a great question. Emma.
Thank you for doing this workshop. It's great. I have started in January the role of general presbyter in my presbytery. And so I did the refresher courses that are offered online on my own. But nobody told me to do that. And I think one of the things that I'm because my presbytery has 26, 27 congregations. If I were to do a poll at our next presbytery meeting, most people would not know that they have to do this, that the presbytery should be doing this annually, and that the congregation or session should be doing this annually. And I'm wondering if there is communication coming down from assembly about the decisions to be made, with the reminders that people should be looking at the safe church policy on a regular basis and putting it on their website and that kind of stuff. I was wondering what the communication strategy is.
Sure. In terms of the annual review, there was a letter that went out around Easter from me that went to every session, ministry board, camp board, and presbytery and synod, indicating that an annual review was required and how to do that, along with suggestions on best practices as it came to the use of email, and the suggestion that all sessions and courts of the church put a little button on their websites that would indicate how to make a complaint or how to access the church's policies. I think that was just before Easter. Then during this summer, there'll be a letter that comes from two letters that come from the office. The first will come from the General Assembly office with all of the referrals and the feedback and the results of General Assembly sent to each court, saying this is what the General Assembly decided that impacts you as a presbytery, you as a session, you as a non-congregational ministry. And there'll also be a letter coming from some of us in the office who are on the call today, just underscoring the importance of putting a link to information about the policies, how to make the complaint, how to make a complaint, who to complain to, a few new resources that are available online, and announcements about upcoming webinars and seminars, and reminding people again that they can call us anytime for individual help whenever there's a complaint, or geared to context webinars or visits. Is that, and if you can think of anything else, Emma, that would be helpful. That'd be great. I know that there's been slow pickup on the annual review. I think it caught some people off guard when I sent out the letter in at Easter. But I think occasionally correspondence goes missing, but if you check with the presbytery clerk or some of the clerks of sessions in your presbytery, um, some of them should have some record of that correspondence. And
Okay.
at this point, unfortunately, we don't always know we don't know the other ministries like general presbyters and things like that, or I would have sent one to you, but I'll try and sort that out. I was doing it presbytery by presbytery.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing to add to Ian's comments. Each presbytery is meant to have a leading with care committee and a standing committee for dealing with complaints related to sexual abuse and sexual harassment that may also become the committee that handles general harassment and workplace violence complaints. So might be a good thing. We're relying on all of you to go back to your presbyteries, and if those standing committees don't exist, maybe asking some questions and seeing what the strategy is. Similarly to being prepared to address situations before they become full-blown courses and patterns of behavior that could be classified as harassment, being prepared within your presbytery to handle things before something happens, generally helps. Of course, we're always here to assist when that's needed. But it's just some good hygiene for the courts of our churches to make sure that they've got the people in place with the knowledge to handle some of these things. We plan as well on doing some more in-depth training with people who can be supports regionally in addition to national office staff. But yeah, thanks for asking that, Emma.
And to add to that one, Kara, could I make a plea for positive gossip? Tell a few friends, go to a presbytery meeting and stand up and draw it to everyone's attention, draw it to some colleagues' attention, and hopefully they'll tell two friends and they'll tell two friends.
Russell, I saw your question or observation in the chat. Did you want to say that out loud or do you want me to read it? I'm happy either way.
Well, I can comment on it. It's
Sure.
great. We tell people to go to the presbytery to report a complaint against the minister. And to be blunt, I don't see that as a problem in our congregation per se, but I'd suggest vast majority of the people in our congregation wouldn't have a clue what presbytery they belong to. In my history, growing up in the Presbyterian church, it took me 30 years before I kind of started to clue in the presbytery. So, one of our members has a complaint against the minister. We tell them, oh, go report it to clerk of presbytery. Huh? I don't even know what synod I'm in, let alone find the right clerk.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good observation, Russell. Thanks for bringing that up. We were sharing some things about the safety policies with camp staff the other day, and a similar kind of question came up about like, well, what do you do if you don't know where to direct things, or if you direct it to someone and then it doesn't go anywhere? And I'm forgetting the exact wording you used, Ian, but it was really helpful for me at least that, there is no wrong pathway. Whoever receives information about a complaint, like, has a responsibility to help get it to the right place. Um, so within a congregational setting, for sure, you could also maybe add information about what presbytery you're in and how to find that presbytery clerk. But if you're, say, the clerk of session and someone says, I've got a concern about our minister, um, your response wouldn't necessarily be, "Oh, don't talk to me about that. That has to go to presbytery." It would be, "Okay, great. Tell me what's up, and I'll help you get that to the right people." Um,
Yeah.
so it's a bit of a both and I think of being upfront with people and also making sure that people who are likely to receive concerns or complaints know how to direct that to the next person and help shepherd that along.
No, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Accompaniment is one of the things we talk a lot about. Carragh described one aspect of accompaniment. So if somebody comes and says, I don't know who to talk to, as Carragh said, you don't just say, go talk to that person or talk and give a title. But really it's about, well, I'll go with you. I'll contact that person if you'd like. I'll go with you if you like. I'll join you on that call at least, and then you can go ahead with the person who's best equipped or best positioned to deal with the complaint. Same if someone comes to you and says they're in danger or they're experiencing violence. They've come to you for help, and you have a responsibility to accompany them to the right place to help them get the answers that they need or get them to the person who has good answers for them.
Yeah. I'm not seeing any additional questions just yet, so I'm gonna keep adding a little bit, adding layers and layers of different intervention here. Um, Again, a piece of this with the preparedness, the more that you just sprinkle information about this into a congregational context, the more that people are then prepared to deal with situations as they arise and also know who to talk to when things come up. Um, so one of the resources that should be posted within the next couple weeks is a set of like sample slides that you can put up during announcements or that you can read during announcements to let people know, we're committed to having a safe environment here. Harassment won't be tolerated, and we want to address it as soon as possible if something does happen. Um, if something happens, you're encouraged to reach out to this person and this person. Um, you might then get that bringing people to ask questions about those policies, and those are really good teaching moments. I think some of the best ways that we prevent harassment and reduce its severity is by just being clear about what our expectations are of one another in community. So giving people those tools in kind of the day-to-day ministry of things is often simpler than trying to catch someone up after something bad has already happened or potentially happened multiple times.
My my email address is on the screen. Uh, Carragh has shown us all how to find email addresses for David Phillips. If you have some questions for him about leading with care, also Carragh's email address is on the Safe Church webpage, along with Tim Purvis, who works largely in the sexual abuse and harassment policy, along with
With Liz Brewer, who's
Liz
also
Brewer,
ministry and church vocations. Yeah.
who can help with, especially with sexual abuse and harassment. So either questions or complaints. And again, if you ever are in a situation where your church is contemplating the need to investigate a situation and you're not sure what to do, whether you've received a complaint or not, or what the steps are that you should take in the initial phases, please just give us a call and we can coach any sized group through those early stages. The policies are written for the general practices of the church, but every case is unique. So there's always going to be a situation where there'll be a wrinkle that's a bit confusing, and we're happy to work those questions through with you and share what we know and get the kind of help that groups may need if we're not able to support you in the way that you need to be. There'll be some more webinars in September, October, November. And again, there'll be some correspondence coming out to the clerks of presbytery and session and other bodies in the church sometime before I'd say the 5th of September at the latest. So keep an eye out for that.
Any other questions before we close?
I'm good. This has been great. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. And yeah, we encourage you to be positive gossips and help us spread the word. It really helps. And it really does take all of us to be role models and offer leadership in creating church environments where people feel comfortable and respected and that they trust that the church will be accountable when bad things happen. So very grateful for you all taking the time to be here and for being leaders in your communities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Take good care, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.